Hey, I'm Andrea from Santa Fe Painting Workshops, and today I'm going to show you how to paint a really easy aspen tree. The colors you need will be just the primaries in black and white. So phthalo blue, cadmium red, this one is cadmium red medium, but cadmium red light is okay too. This is cadmium yellow medium, black and white, titanium white, doesn't matter which black you have. And then if you'd like to add burnt umber or raw umber, some kind of brown, that could be additional. So let's get started. This is a reference image that I'm using, and I will come back to this later. So we're going to make the aspen sort of off the page and it filling the page. Now for the aspen, we want it to be small to big or big to small. So we're going to go a little wider. So I'm going to look at my center point here, and I'm going to go left a little bit, and I'm going to start maybe drawing. I'll just put a little line there, okay? So go to your center point and then go left a little bit. Okay, now go to center point and go left a lot more and mark that. So we're going to try to connect those two lines. Okay, so there's our tree. Now it's probably a little bit hard for you to see, and I'm going to actually widen my tree a little bit just by doing a parallel line. Okay, so that's going to be my basic tree outline right there. Then I want to have a few trees in the background on the right side. So one will be off the page. Again, we'll go small to big, so it gets a little bigger at the bottom. And then let's do another one that's sort of right next to it. And then we'll do one skinny one that is by itself back here. Okay, so now we're going to paint the sky. So holding this up a little closer, we have our first tree here, we have one off the page here, one right next to it, and one skinny one by itself here. We're going to need a lot of white today, but since the paint dries fast, we don't need to put a whole bunch on here. Right now I just have white and black and blue, and we're going to start with mixing up a medium blue with just a touch of yellow in it, because that's my favorite kind of sky, is adding a little bit of yellow in the blue. And we're going to start with painting the sky, actually, the background. So we got our blue, nice big hunk of white here, and just a little bit of yellow, maybe about that much. Let's mix that up. So it's a really rich, dark blue. I think it's probably a little darker than what I want. So we'll add a nice, another big old hunk of white in there. There we go. That's better. And then I'm going to add more yellow. Yellow's not necessary, by the way. It's just something I love for my sky color. Okay, so now we have our sky. We're ready to start painting. So now we're just going to go ahead and paint in a triangle of blue sky. So we'll start here in this edge. And to get your paint to flow a little better with acrylic, we want to add a little bit of water to our brush. I like to just spray it on my palette. And then we can get a relatively clean edge. And remember, we're going to paint white right next to this, so we can clean this up later. It's okay if it's not perfect. Okay, so this is our first tree over here. You can see this shape here. So you can just, if you want to make that a little bit more smooth, you can. Okay, and now we have a tree here and a tree here, and this is actually negative space. So we're going to go ahead and paint right there. But notice we almost have like a big triangle here. It's not very narrow at the bottom, but it's just like a big blue shape. Okay, so really see that as a shape. Because if you paint the negative space, which is the sky, then your positive space, your tree, will appear, right? I went a little bit wider on the bottom for this tree. Okay, again, you can just spray water right on your brush like this, or dip it in water and then just dab some off, and that will help it flow a little better. Okay, and if you make a little mistake, like this tree is way too skinny, but I can just fix that when we paint white over it later. So at this point we have 3 trees, 1, 2, 3, right? And if we want to give the sky a little bit of dimension because the paint is wet, what we can do is put our brush right into the white, and then you can either start at the top or go at the bottom. I'm going to start at the top, and we're going to blend white down into that darker blue. So it's wet paint right now. Let's start on this one because that one we painted first. And so you're covering the whole area before you move down too much because the white is blending in with the blue. And so we just get a little bit of a dark to light idea here. And this is not a necessary step. So again, we'll do the same thing on the other side here. Okay, and so we have a little bit of a dark to light going on here. It's very subtle, but it just makes it a little bit more unique. Okay, so now we have our basic sky. What I might recommend now is drying this, okay? So if you have a hair dryer that you can dedicate to your painting practice, obviously this one is, I would give this a good dry before the next step, because if we start painting our white trees right now, we'll blend in light blue on the side. So let's get this blue really nice and dry first. What I recommend, if your canvas is already kind of loose, then use high heat or medium heat. If your canvas is already kind of tight, I would do medium or low heat, because the canvas is cotton, right? And so it will shrink with high heat. Now we're going to start the trees, and let me just show you the brushes I recommend. So I recommend a flat, and this one is not sure of the size because my brushes are very well used, but it's a good medium size. Maybe it's a, I don't know, 8 or a 12 or something. And then I like to have a liner brush, something with a nice tip like this. This is a Zen brush from Michaels. It's a really great brush. Really what you just need is a flat and something kind of pointy, because I'll show you the details that we're going to create here. Okay, so first we're going to get the white paint on the flat brush. Okay, and so we're just getting it on the tip of the brush here. For now, just go ahead and you can go up and down. Eventually we're going to want to take our strokes going across, but for now we'll just cover, and we're doing one tree at a time. So let's just cover this tree here. I usually fill in, everything before I go to the edge. It's just a personal preference thing. So now going to the edge here. And you can see I'm just pushing, I'm loading up a lot of paint, and then I'm pushing really hard against, not really hard, but pretty hard against this edge so I can fill in the paint there. Okay, so this is a good time if like I want to widen the top of my tree, this is a good time to make that change. So now we're going to take our brush strokes, we're going to go across the tree and kind of like this. Because if you look at the bark of an aspen tree, and I'll show you the image. This is the image that I'm using here. So look at the bark here and how it curves. Right, it curves kind of down, right? So that's what I'm using as a model. And so if the shadows and the lines curve down, let's just let everything curve down that way. It also gives us a sense of three-dimensionality. Because it's a cylinder, right? It's like a form that's 3D and it's a cylinder, and so we want to make it feel like that. Okay, now we're going to add the details, okay? So back to the reference image. You can see that we have lines that are curving downwards, and we have these little imperfections that look like eyes and little dots. So I like to start with the lines, and we're going to get our liner brush and just add a little bit of black to the tip, okay? And then just kind of really wipe it off. Now let's do the lines of the tree. I like to vary them a little bit, and push really light. Notice I didn't add any more black to my brush. Now I'm going to go under some of these, like this one's kind of dark, and just sort of blend it a little bit. And maybe even add a few more lines under it. And I haven't added any more paint to my brush. Okay, let's add the little eyes now. So I'm adding just a little bit more black paint to the brush now. And we'll do this one. So basically you're just doing a line that's sort of meeting on the sides and then sort of meeting on the ends. And there seems to be one, you know, you could also look at it as a triangle on its side. Okay, so now let's add some of the details. I'm putting more black paint on my brush, and I'm going to turn this one into an eye, and I'm just sort of pushing here. Okay, just sort of dabbing it on. And let's do one, let's see, let's do a little knot right here. And you'll notice that because the white's not dry yet, and that's purposeful, we want the white to be wet still because we want it to be kind of gray. Some of these will turn out to be gray, and you can always go back over them. But this will be like a knot that's sort of coming out of the tree a little bit here. And then maybe there's a line, goes like that. And let's do one more over here in this corner. It's going off the page. And then there's some areas where there's like some imperfection. So there's like these little dots in some areas. And so you can just sort of have fun with some of these little details, dots here and there, some knots, and then some eyes, okay? And I would just try to vary them. Also, here and there, take a little step back from your piece or look at it in a mirror and just see how it's looking so far. I'm going to add a few more lines. Okay, so I think I'll stop right there for this tree. So this one is done. So now we have a sense of how it's done, and let's just, again, we're doing them one at a time so that we get this blending, okay? Because when we have value changes from dark to light, it looks more 3D. So if these were just like harsh black lines on the tree, it just wouldn't look as 3D or as realistic. And so we want it to blend and look kind of grayish. Okay, so let's move on to this tree now. So we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to lay down the white first and then get ready for our black. For this one, this brush is going to be probably too big, so I'm going to go ahead and get a smaller flat. By the way, the flats that I prefer, they are hard bristle. I think for acrylic, I just like hard bristle because it applies better, but a lot of people do use soft or medium bristle. I think soft is probably better for oil painting. Okay, so let's get into this tree. Keep in mind that the trees don't have to be perfect. They can be a bit curvy. And also, if you make your tree thicker than you wanted, we still have that blue paint saved, so we can fix up the edges with the blue paint. And what I'll probably do is I'll clean up my edge at the end there. Okay, so you can go ahead and go to your black details now. Notice I didn't even add any more black paint that whole entire time. I'm just adding more now. Okay, now we'll add some details and some of those fun little eyes. I like to vary them. We have one there and we have one there, so let's put one here. So just do like a little dot or a big dot and then this kind of thing. And if you got, like this part got a lot of black there, you could actually get another, or your white brush, and you could just try to maybe paint right into that. It will make it gray, but you can fix some areas that maybe you think maybe got too dark or something. So I'm just adding random dots and random lines. It's really, it's really the variety and being irregular that makes it, I think, appear so natural. Okay, so now let's do our last tree. I think that's good enough for now. I am adding more paint in this one. I want a little bit more texture. You also might want to wrap it around to the sides when you do this. So go ahead and paint your white on the side here. We didn't do it on that side, but then we can do what's called a gallery wrap and wrap the image around to the side. Okay, so once your white is down, go ahead and do your details. Again, take a look at where you have the big black marks on your trees and just try to vary it so they're not all lined up. So again, we have a big eye there and a big eye there, big eye there, so maybe there's an eye in between those spaces. Okay, so just kind of being a little erratic about the way you do things. That's how, it would probably be in nature, wouldn't be so lined up, right? And I'm doing some lines right under the other ones and then some spaced out so they're not, again, not evenly spaced too. You also might want to think about focal point here, and rule of thirds is a really nice focal point. So your rule of thirds areas would be here and down here. So maybe we do want a prominent eye in this spot. Of course, I call them eyes. They're not really eyes, but they look like eyes, right? That's why I think I love aspens. They feel so lively. Add some knots coming off of the tree, because that's what we would actually see in nature. And add elements coming off of the canvas too. And don't forget, wrap these lines around the side. So I'm just continuing these details around the side here. And then you don't need to frame it. That got a little too dark for my taste. So I'm going to go in with the white and go right over that spot. Just tone it down a little bit. So let's dry this really well. First, just make sure you're happy with the trees and where they are. If you need to touch up any of the sky, like there's some little minor spots I could touch up with my sky. So first you want to do that, and then we want to dry this really well. When you're touching up with the sky, you might actually use the same liner brush, because this brush will be a lot more precise. So it's just really little spots. And this is really dialing in and getting kind of really perfect about things. It's not necessary either. Now, before I do this side, I want this to be really dry. So let's go ahead and dry this first. Okay, so now it's really dry and now I can touch up the sky just a little bit. You also could flip your canvas at this point to, if it's easier for you to get a clean edge. So you could hold it this way and maybe get an easier line. Now the color's a little bit different because we did do that blend, so you just might want to blend it out a little bit by adding more in that section if it looks streaky. We don't want it to look streaky. So we're just bringing it into that whole sort of width there. Okay, so it's a little bit better now, and we don't have to be perfect about it, but I think it does feel a little bit cleaner now. Okay, so now let's get into the branches. And so this is where we can use some of our burnt umber and our black to create some branches. Added burnt umber and got this color, so it's really dark, but it's not super dark. And remember that acrylic dries darker, so no matter what we have here, it will dry a little bit darker. So I'm going to go back to that Zen brush, which is really nice for branches. So the branches, because this is a forest, there's probably some trees behind and trees all around. So the branches can be kind of random, but not necessarily coming out of this tree. They could be coming from trees behind this one. So keep that in mind. Now I pushed hard and then I pulled up as I went down on this branch, and that's why I got that sense of depth. So you want to have some thin lines and some thicker lines. It's okay if they cross in, but I'm really barely touching. This is why I love this brush. This is where this brush I think really shines, is this kind of thing where we're going thick to thin and creating these really precise, gorgeous marks. And I think that adding the branches in really does add really nice structure to the piece. Add a bit of water to your paint. You really want it to flow nicely for this. Have some coming off the page here into the scene. Some of them can branch off quite a bit. Small ones, big ones, vary. One maybe coming right down like this. Of course, as you know, every forest would be totally different with how these branches will be coming into the scene. So don't feel like you need it to look like mine. Now I'm keeping branches because the idea here is that we're in front of this tree, and so I'm not going to put any across this one. And some are really light. If we go really light on some, they really recede back to the distance. So like these thicker ones are moving forward, these really small thin ones are moving back. We want to have that variety. Now when the leaves get in here, this will look even better. Because it might feel a little busy too right now, but it really does look a lot better when we have some branches in here. Okay, I think I'll stop here. I'm going to keep it a little bit simple and just stop the branches right here. Give you a closer look. Okay, so this is where I laid mine out, and now we're going to throw some leaves in there around these branches. And go ahead and keep, if you have some of the brown paint left, go ahead and put that to the side and put it under a can or like a little old Tupperware container. I have about that much left, what's on my palette knife, but it's enough if I need to touch up or if I need a little bit, like I feel like I need another branch or two. It's always better to have a bit more paint than not enough. At the reference image again, so look at the shapes of the leaves really carefully, okay, before you start going, because we're going to make this up. We're not going to follow this exactly, right? And then also we have the yellow and the green colors. I'm not going to do the red. I want this to be more of like a summer going into fall maybe scene, so I'm going to keep yellow and green leaves for mine. Okay, so you want some yellow. So we're going to use yellow and white for some of the leaves. Then we're going to take some of the sky color, and we're going to make some green leaves. I'm going to do some leaves with this smaller round brush. This is actually a medium bristle, so it's not a hard bristle, and it's a pretty nice brush, and I'm going to do some of my bigger leaves with this one. So I'm going to start with the yellow, and we're just putting, again, the paint on the tip of the brush, and we'll just work around. We don't want to be perfect around the branches, so we just want to sort of randomly put the leaves in, and they can be different. And notice I'm just pushing, and that becomes the shape of the leaf. Some leaves are just going to be coming into the scene because they're above the tree, right? So I put some leaves near these branches, but they don't have to be exactly lining up perfectly. And you can put as many leaves as you want. You can pack this scene with leaves, or you can keep it kind of simple, but I'm just pushing this paint in. And this is why the brush is important, because it's just the shape of the brush that's giving us this. Now, just to show you, so that's just all one size, like one level. Let's do much smaller little dabs, and you can even use a smaller brush for this, but let's just randomly, like polka dots almost, okay? Because these are going to read as being back in the distance, okay? And if you want to just take a step back from your piece and see that, it's good to see. And so you can do it either way. You can put all your big ones first, then go back with the small ones, or go back and forth. It's really up to you and what works best for you. You know, and put some on top of the branches. Don't just go, again, like lining up with the branch. Be pretty erratic. It's nice because you don't have to be perfect. Nature is not exactly perfect. And also, let's leave some spot for the green, so we don't want to fill it in too much either. And where you have those lighter branches, do the smaller dots, because those branches are back in the distance, and so the leaves are there's going to be some leaves back in the distance too, near those areas. So in fact, I'm just going to go around and just do small dots around some of those smaller branches that I did. If there's an element in your tree you don't like, this is a good time to like put a leaf over that. You know, like I had this area I wasn't so sure about, so I could totally throw some leaves on top of that and reduce that down a little bit. And maybe the leaves are denser, you know, in the back, and then here they're not as dense. Again, not being the same as you treat the whole, like let's not be exactly the same. Let's leave some areas with a lot more negative space. That will feel more natural in your scene. So let's do some green ones. Clean your brush and go and fill in some areas with green. I would not do as much with the green. I would just maybe pick some little spots. So I think maybe I'll do some green here. And I like to do everything in kind of thirds and sort of like off center. So I'm going to go diagonally and just do some greens in here. I'm going to do some greens down in this corner so it's kind of coming out. You know, there's a little green coming up here. And make sure to do some small ones too. Maybe in some areas there's a whole bunch of the green ones. And I'm going to go up here and throw some greens in this section. And I'm going to vary these like with the yellows, just like mix them right in actually. Take a step back. I really like how it looks when there's like the big rich yellow, Like I'm really liking these leaves because they're standing out and becoming highlights. So I'm gonna go back to the yellow color and just maybe like make some of those yellow leaves really stand out more. And now I'm thinking about my focal point too. Remember, rule of thirds is a great place to bring a focal point. So that would be like in this area we're not gonna touch, or down here somewhere. So let's actually make some of these yellows a lot bigger. And I'm really getting textured. I'm really keeping a lot of that paint there. So it's got texture to it. I'm not, spreading it out or anything. We don't want to go too much with this because then it won't become a highlight anymore. It wants to be something that we don't have too much of. We don't want too much of a good thing, right? I'm going to bring one really bright one up here. What's nice about going over your old yellow leaves too is that it's further pushing those forward and the ones that are lighter back in the distance. So we're creating more three-dimensionality, which is what we want in a painting like this. Okay, I'm feeling like it's pretty good with the leaves here, so this is a good place to stop. This is a good time now. You just take a look and see, do we have enough branches, too many? Do we need to do anything else to this painting? Last thing I want to do in this painting that I feel would look really good is to scumble white paint on the tree. So I've got white paint on my palette knife. It's not super thick. You just put it on and you just sort of like scrape it on there. Where the tree maybe got a little muddy or dark would be a good place to lightly just do a really light, it's like dry brush almost. We don't want to get rid of our details. Just here and there, just a little bit of highlights here, a little bit of texture. The tree has texture. Now the smaller trees, I'd go with the smaller palette knife. A little palette knife like this for the smaller trees. And again, we don't want too much paint on here. And we're just brightening up things a little bit. And also just making things look perhaps a little bit less perfect. And here's the deal, if you do too much, you can just use the black right over it, or you get a wet rag. I went a little bit too much on that one, and you just wipe it right out right then, right? And so it's very forgiving. But this, I think, just added a little, it's adding a little bit more texture to the trees, so they're not so flat. And you can have fun with this. What I'll say is some people will feel like they mess up their painting if they do this, so I don't recommend everyone to do this. Just do it if you feel really confident that you feel like you want to rough up your trees a little bit. To me, my trees were looking just a little bit too perfect. So again, what we can do is you can go back in there and put that black back out again. Bring it back in again. Actually, let's go ahead and some of the parts where we want to create a little darker areas, you can just dab in a little bit more black just into some of it so that it looks a little bit more 3D. Just in a few of these little dark areas. If they got too gray, just dab in a little bit more. Okay, so we're gonna call this one done. Here it is, the final painting. I think it turned out great, and I hope you had a lot of fun doing it, and I'd love to see what you create. Let me know if you have any questions. If you'd like to learn more about color and composition, check out my course, Abstraction Beyond Boundaries. In the online pre-recorded course, I show you how to mix colors like a pro, teach you 6 eye-catching composition types, and provide you with many techniques and tools to make your abstract painting stand out. Through slides on art vocabulary and multiple demonstration videos, you will be armed with all the resources you need to make abstract painting flow easily. To learn more about the course, click on the link below in the description.